Hi, this is John from Deathfiend. We started in 2019 as a kind of underground DIY death metal project. Me and Andrea had been playing in bands together and we wanted to do something new. I wanted to do something sludgy, a bit Celtic Frost, a bit Hellhammer. And he likes fast stuff, hardcore, Sepultura, that kind of stuff. So we just put it all together. So you get this kind of sludgy death metal, but there's also fast bits, like Celtic Frost, really. But yeah, we started as a three-piece as well. We had Chris on bass. He left, and then we got Rick Farn, and that's where we are now.
What is the meaning behind the band name?
The name Deathfiend, we like the name, but it is also the first demo by Hellhammer. When they first started and they were struggling to even play riffs, it's quite a raw demo. It's before they even became Hellhammer, really, and locked the songs down. So we thought it was a good starting point. I'd been listening to a lot of 80s demos as an influence of Deathfiend, when bands were putting out tapes and tape trading. So it seemed fitting to start with Deathfiend, which later became Celtic Frost. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little about Dark Rising?
Yes, the new album is called Dark Rising. It's out now on Gruesome Records and on vinyl on Phobia Records. It's our second release. We released Beyond Life first, which was, our first collection of songs. We were happy with it. It's quite short, a bit like Morbid Tales. But yeah, Dark Rising, it's the same. It's kind of everything we do. There's some fast tracks on there. There's some kind of grinding, head-nodding tracks, a bit of kind of raw Motorhead stuff, some Bolt Thrower influences on there. And we worked with Barney from Napalm Death, who's an old friend of ours. We got Carl Willits on the first album, so we thought we'd get him, and he came down and shouted for us. But yeah, Dark Rising, it's just, a second part of the Deathfiend story, and it's an album that we're really proud of. It's short and sweet, but does everything it needs to do. It's got more atmospheric sections, and it sets us up for the third release, really.
Can you talk about the lyrics on this release?
The lyrics on Dark Rising are based on a few different things, actually. The dark side of human nature, the kind of war between dark and light, within humanity, trying to be moral and ethical, but at the same time, sometimes acting like animals and predators. But it also is reflective of what we can see around us as well. Dark Rising, it just feels like, things sometimes are getting worse. It feels sometimes that you can't seem to articulate your position in this world. The powers that be seem to hold all the power and not the people. There's ecological things around us as well, which you might be looking at. I mean, it's not all bad, but Dark Rising was just a good starting point for this album because it's kind of reflective of the world around us right now. Some of the lyrics on Dark Rising are about the political system. The one with Barney, Relive the Torment, was just about how you get this swing between left and right all the time, between Conservative and Labour, but there's no alternative. So you just feel like you're trapped in this kind of it just doesn't change. You're trapped in a sort of prison of ideas. There's also things like Dark Rising, the title track, which is just about the kind of claustrophobia you feel. Outliers as well, which is about the human race. The fact that they don't fit into the natural order of animals. They're separate. They've got consciousness, but also they can be predators, apex predators as well. So there's a lot of different lyrics on there. There's also a track called Forget Mankind, which is kind of like a bleak atmospheric track as well. But yeah, that's just, again, we like to focus on human nature, some of the good points of human nature, but also the negative side to humanity and living on this planet as well.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the album cover art?
The album cover art was done by Belial Necro Art. We just found some of their stuff online. We didn't want to use AI, even though you can create some great pictures with AI these days. We wanted something that was a little more handcrafted, a little more underground looking, black and white preferably, and they came up with it. It was fantastic. It was exactly what we wanted. There was a few little nods to Napalm Death Scum with like a winged creature at the top rising out of this kind of burning society. So yeah, it just, we're happy to work with proper artists, people who make art, people who make hand-drawn stuff as well in the future. So yeah, we just found them online and we were happy to work with them.
Can you share your insights into your cooperation with Gruesome Records?
We just found Gruesome Records online. They're an underground label based in Portugal, and they release all sorts of stuff, death metal, speed metal, 80s influence stuff, some crust, some industrial. But yeah, I suppose mostly heavy stuff, really. And um, the guys who run it are really supportive. They released our stuff on Digipack CD. They released the first album, Beyond Life, and they were happy to release Dark Rising as well. But that's only on CD. So we do work with Phobia Records as well, who are fantastic. And they release our stuff on vinyl. So I think it's good to work with different people, whatever works for you. And we might end up working with some different labels in the future. But at the moment, Gruesome Records and Phobia Records and our Bandcamp is where you can find stuff.
What do you do for your livelihood outside of music?
We all do different things as day jobs. Andrea, the drummer, he's a driver, drives lorries and stuff. Rick, the bass player, he's a forensic scientist, so he works on some pretty complex things in a lab. And me, I've been doing radio stuff for a long time. I work for a rock radio station, so I work at festivals, speak to bands, produce shows, things like that. It's quite a nice job to be in, and I'm always working around music. So yeah, we've all got jobs, but we try and put fair bit into music as well.
When did you first discover your interest in metal music?
I was actually. When did I discover metal? Well, I suppose growing up, I saw things like Iron Maiden and Saxon and Judas Priest on people's jackets. But the first time I got into metal personally was when it got faster and dirtier and more raw. So things like Venom, Metallica, Bathory as well. Got the album Under the Sign of the Black Mark. And just absolutely loved it. And then the first album I went out and bought that I suppose was proper metal was Celtic Frost, Morbid Tales. And that became the blueprint, really, of lots of things that I liked. It's heavy, it's chuggy, it's got those lovely guitar tones, slow, it's fast. And from then on, went into death metal and, all sorts of metal and rock and everything in between, black metal as well.
What obstacles have you faced as a musician and how did you overcome them?
There's always obstacles as a musician, whether it's keeping the band together, having somewhere to rehearse, having your equipment okay, writing songs, getting along with other people, traveling together. It's hard, it's hard to do that. But we've been doing bands a long time. We've worked together for a long time in various projects. So you just learn to get through the pitfalls. I'll often drive to gigs. I'm happy to drive there. We all unload the stuff. We all share responsibilities and try and help each other out. But yeah, you always come up against a few things here and there. But as I said, I've been doing this a long time, and hopefully we don't come up with too many problems these days.
Is Is there a specific non-metal genre or artist you love to collaborate with?
Who would I like to collaborate with that's not metal? Lots of people. I like electronic music, hip hop, ambient music, experimental stuff. If it was going to be Deathfiend, I'd like to have Kate Bush on one of the tracks because be nice some female vocals, and I've always enjoyed her music since the 80s. So yeah, I'd personally work with Kate Bush, but there's lots of great singers and musicians out there that you could collaborate with. Be interesting to have a Death Fiend track with some rapping on it or something like that, but I don't know. I don't know if it'd work.
How do you perceive the evolution of metal music over the years?
The evolution of metal music to me is all based around the guitar. So if you start with things like Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin, it was all about amplification, maybe tuning down a little bit, lots of blues, amplifying blues music to make it sound heavy. After that, things got a bit more metallic, and you got the new wave of British heavy metal with bands like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest. Then I guess things got a bit dirtier with Venom and Celtic Frost, who were using different tones and I suppose nastier sounds. Um, and then it was Metallica, really, who didn't tune down, but they played fast, razor sharp riffs, thrash. Then bands started to tune down, and death metal was born. And then after that, I guess there were things like emo, metalcore, pop punk, and over the last few years, 7-string guitars have come in, so bands are tuning even lower, creating even heavier music. But yeah, for me, metal music is based around guitars, the evolution of guitars, where they're heading, the technology, the amplification. And usually it's guitar loving people who gravitate towards metal in general, people who play instruments. It's not always the case, there's industrial artists, electronic artists, but for the most part, it is about the axe, about the guitar.
Rapid fire section, just for fun. Your thoughts on AI generated cover art?
I'm not against AI cover art. I think AI is interesting. I've sat there myself, putting commands into it and seeing what you get back. So it is interesting technology, and especially film as well. AI film is quite interesting. But there's also something strange about it. There's something soulless. There's something that feels like it's come out of a production line, and it lacks the human quality, it lacks the hand-drawn quality and the time as well. It's like creating AI music. It's not the same as 3 people getting in a room and feeding off each other's energy, which is very natural. So I'm not against AI. I'm interested in it, but I'd rather use real artists and support real artists.
First album you bought with your own money?
First album I bought was probably London Calling by The Clash. Somebody gave me a Boots voucher for about £5, and I remember going in there. It's a chemist, but it used to sell vinyl, and it was a double album, so I got, I felt like I was getting value for money. I got a double album for £5, and London Calling by The Clash is still quite a classic. It's not metal, but it was, I suppose, quite commercial punk at the time. But yeah, that was one of the first I bought.
Is there a conspiracy theory you think could actually be true?
I try and avoid conspiracy theories because I think they've been amplified so much over the last few years, especially during COVID, that a lot of them are rooted in nonsense, absolute nonsense. So I try and be really wary of conspiracy theories. Obviously, there are some which ring true, whether it's about capitalism or about shady businessmen or billionaires and things like that. So there are conspiracy theories that I would be drawn to, but most of them are rooted in propaganda, misinformation, and trying to disparage other people, really. Um, so yeah, I'm very wary of conspiracy theory. I think you've just got to be careful.
If your music were a movie, which one would it be?
If our music was a movie, it would definitely be something set in a kind of fantasy realm, with maybe creatures and sorcery and castles and things like that. So I'm going to be quite predictable and go with Conan the Barbarian. Conan the Barbarian. It's a great movie. It's never been surpassed, and it yeah reminds me of Celtic Frost and things like that. So I'll go with that.
What's the worst job you've ever had?
I've had quite a few jobs, some in the music industry actually. I was a production runner, which means that you have to get all the stuff for the dressing rooms at various venues. So I've worked for Slayer, I've worked for Nine Inch Nails, I've worked for all sorts of people, picked them up from airports, taken them to hotels, and then got their food for the dressing room. That used to be an interesting job, but stressful. You sometimes get shouted at, but you get to watch the bands and hang out with them. One of the worst jobs I've ever had is DJing in clubs, because you have to be there at 9 at night and then leave at 3 in the morning, and you're just surrounded by annoying drunk people all the time.
What's your favourite pop song?
It's hard to say what my favourite pop song is. I think being older, you listen to so much music when you're growing up. When I was very young, I used to listen to things like ABBA, I suppose, in the 70s when I was growing up. Then in the 80s, things like Madonna and electro pop and things like that, synthesizer pop. During the 90s, there was some interesting dance music and electronic music. And pop music is experimental as ever. Pop music can be some of the most experimental music out there, even though it's singing about things that maybe are about love, romance. But pop music is always quite important. So I listened to loads of it growing up, but I couldn't choose something straight off my head.
What are the future plans for Deathfiend?
The future for Deathfiend is to follow up the album Dark Rising, do more gigs as well, travel. We're going to go to Ireland next year, which I'm looking forward to. We've got quite a few gigs booked, but we're looking for more, so get in touch, especially in the UK. But yeah, I mean, we're playing a death metal all day with members of Memoriam and some underground death metal bands quite soon. And I just want to write more songs. I want to make a slightly longer album next time, longer than Beyond Life and Dark Rising. But yeah, we're already starting to write things. We're already starting to get ideas together. We just need to shape it into something. But yeah, just check out our Bandcamp for the releases that are out there now, and we'll keep working on Deathfiend stuff for the future. But yeah, thank you. Thanks for the interview. Check out Deathfiend, especially if you like it old school, sludgy and dirty, but also some fast bits as well. Check out our Bandcamp. And we've got merch up there, vinyl, T-shirts, all sorts of things. So yeah, and hopefully we'll see you at a venue at some point. Thank you.